Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session. So, last session of the day, I expect you're all waiting for the party, but I've been asked to tell you is don't forget the Ask the Experts session between the end of this session and the party. So it's at 6:45, and I've been asked to tell you to, if you've got any questions for the experts, and there will be a number, please send the questions to that email address, and they will be asked for you, I hope. Okay. So what is this session about? This session is really about what is Azure for IT pros. There's an awful lot of functionality in Azure, and there's no way I can go through it all in an hour. But what I want to do is really just sort of set the scene, show you what's there, tell you and try and inspire you as to why you might be using it, all right? And then show you the sort of rudimentaries of getting compute working, of getting storage working, and getting virtual networking working. And those are the key things I'm going to focus on. I will do a very small piece right at the end on using the Azure Active Directory for identity store as well. So let's have a quick show of hands. How many people are using the Azure platform today? Okay, so probably 10% of the audience. Okay, how many have got a Azure subscription or a potential one because they've got MSDN but haven't used it yet? Oh, it's a smaller number. Okay. Right, so let's have a look at what I want to cover. So first of all, I want to very, very briefly talk about IT roles and the challenges and where the cloud fits for us. We're going to do some Azure fundamentals. We'll then do a portal tour, and this is pretty demo-rich, this particular session. I'm going to then look at how we run applications and services within the portal, and we'll look at connecting systems, i.e. using networking, and also building hybrid solutions. And that's really what I want you to think about is it's not the cloud and it's not on-premises, it's hybrid solutions. And that's what we should really be thinking about today. And then very, very briefly, I will finish looking at identity from the Microsoft Azure Active Directory and show you how that might be used as well. So just a warning, this platform changes on a fairly daily basis. It's not quite as bad as that, but I've been caught before now doing a demo and it's changed. And you go, oops, I haven't seen that before. And occasionally I've been caught on that. I've worked with Azure right from the very beginning, and I've seen lots and lots and lots of different portals. There's the sort of current main portal at the moment, and then there's a portal in preview. And you can even go back to a previous portal for some functionality. And you can jump between the different portals to get what you need at the moment. So what do we do today? We all do all the sort of things we know and love, installing hardware, doing stuff in data centers, setting up networking, designing networking, managing storage, backups, applying security patches, and of course, our continuous update. Managing certificates, deploying apps, and monitoring applications, OS health and performance. And the good thing about it, if you go to the cloud, you can do all that as well, pretty much. The only thing you won't be doing is installing the server hardware. But pretty much everything else on there you can do in some way or another. But this is the key. This is the key which we're not terribly good at, which is matching the business requirements by scaling to demand and being really agile. Right? And that's where we want to see using the cloud to really focus in, manage demand, and become very, very agile with the way we use our IT. So in terms of managing demand, somebody goes in into a meeting and says, hey, look, I've got this fantastic idea. We can sell Hoochie Coochie 2000 widgets. And you don't even ask what a 2000 Hoochie Coochie widget is. You just say, great idea. And of course, then there's the entry barrier, is what do we need to build our e-commerce site to actually do this? So, and you do a demand forecast, a nice straight line. Reality is, it's nothing like that. So we end up starting off with an entry barrier. This is just to get started. And Then our actual demand goes like that. Why does it just flatten off at the top? It's basically people have lost confidence because what we've done is we've started scaling, but we muck our scaling up. So at times, what we're doing is we're under capacity. And this is where we lose confidence with our customers. And this project pretty much failed because we were under capacity for quite some time. And of course, we're also over capacity for lots of time as well. A very, very typical scenario that we get is the demand burst. And this could be for event sales. Typical case in the UK was the Olympics. Suddenly the tickets got released, the demand just went through the roof, and it caused major grief for the actual suppliers of the service. And it's an extremely difficult one to deal with. So where do you put it? You put maybe your compute capacity there, huge amount of time, your overcapacity, and then you have these little peaks which are CLMs. Anyone come across a CLM before? They're career limiting moments. And, it's difficult. So what I'm saying is, rather than sort of thinking, how on earth am I going to scale up? How am I going to scale out? How am I going to do this? Where do I put the servers? There's not enough room left in my data center anymore. There's not enough power to power them in the data center. Rather than thinking along those lines, think about leveraging the cloud. All these lovely servers sitting up there ready for you to use, giving you compute, all the storage capability up there. And then, quite often, you're reinventing the wheel. You're doing something somebody has already done. You may well find that service is available for you in the cloud. So you don't even have to build that service. You just leverage the cloud and use the cloud to provide that service. And then another thing with the cloud, which you can think of in terms of bringing good fortune to your organization might have the most amazing piece of in-house software that's been developed over time, maybe some financial modeling, wonderful calculation that's being done. Why not use the cloud to actually market that and make that application available to other people, and obviously charge for it? Of course, the great thing about this is on-demand, compute and storage, and you pay for what you use. Okay, so the Azure platform, what is it? It's a compute platform, it's a storage platform, it has SQL databases in it as well, or capability. Underneath all of that lot lies the management portal. The actual fabric for the management, and then there's a portal to access it, and then there's APIs. And the great thing about the APIs is that you readily use PowerShell. So how do you get a virtual machine into Azure? Use PowerShell. How do you get a virtual network into Azure? Use PowerShell. How do you do anything in Azure? Use PowerShell. All right? There is the portal. You can do it through the portal. And I could demonstrate it with PowerShell, but it would be a bit boring because, we'd run a couple of lines of PowerShell and something would be going on somewhere in the cloud. So what I want to do is I want to interact with the cloud using the portal. So you can use all sorts of management tools. Dev tools go straight up into the cloud as well. And the Azure cloud, it came from really, it was a developer's platform originally, right? So there's no infrastructure as a service. So it's really very much platform as a service for running specialist Azure apps. And what happened is the developers developed or started to develop these apps, and they could deploy them directly from things like Visual Studio. So suddenly the IT department wasn't even involved. And then you've got up there in the cloud, you've got something that's for production, and the IT department isn't even involved. And that's what we've got to really control back. We need to look after the management of our production environments. Let the dev guys have their dev environment, but look after the publishing of all your production applications. The other thing is, if you're not agile, what's going to happen is parts of your organization will sidestep you, and then you'll have this sort of shadow IT situation where parts of the organization, oh, you want a SQL database? We've got one. We got one this afternoon. It's in the cloud, and you're gradually losing, hey, and what data are you putting up there? You're losing control because of the shadow IT. You've got compute, you've got web roles, you've got worker roles, you've got websites, and you've got virtual machines in terms of compute. In terms of storage, we have blobs, tables, queues, and files. I'll come back on what all of this is. In terms of SQL database, we can just create a SQL database up in the cloud. And then constructing on top of all this, there is a whole raft of services. Particular services, for instance, the Azure Active Directory as a service. And what I'm going to have a look at is sort of just go through the different services very, very, very quickly, and then we're going to focus in on getting the compute and the storage operational. So when you're ready, what do? You sign up for a free trial. And if you do a free trial in the UK currently, you get basically access to the portal with 125 quid free spend, right? Unfortunately, today you have to sign up with a credit card. They need to know who you are. But what you can do is you can cap your spend so that if you went over your free 120 quid or whatever it is in this country, it wouldn't take any money off your credit card. And there are certain services which are absolutely free. You can run up free websites, for instance. The thing is to get started. If you've got MSDN, there is an automatic sort of complementary use of Azure. And what you get is so many credits per month. And depending on what your subscription level is, you get a different number of credits. Okay, so what I want to do is start off with actually doing a very, very brief tour of the portal just to show what's there, and then we'll drill in more detail into certain aspects. So let's go across to the current main portal, not the new portal. And what we've got is we've got websites. I'll come back on those. We've got virtual machines. We got mobile services. So if you needed to develop mobile apps, you wanted to do synchronization, you wanted to do push down to mobile devices, these are the services that are all there for you. Cloud services is another type of compute, which I will come back to. SQL database is a way of actually provisioning a SQL database. You can provision a database and have a database literally within a few minutes. You can connect to it from on-premises, or you can actually use it from one of your other cloud services up in the cloud to store the data up there. But we can connect, as I say, we can connect from on-premises. So if you went into a meeting and someone says, oh, we need a SQL database, what's the normal response? It's sort of, and you think money, you think, where am I going to put it? Have I got a server available? And so on. Well, here, you can do it in 5 minutes. And that's what will happen to you unless you start looking at this and adopting it as really as part of your infrastructure. People will sidestep you, and you'll have the shadow IT. Storage, I will come back on again. HD Insight it's a Hadoop cluster. It's for big data and processing of big data. Media services is about ingesting a media stream and then encoding it on the fly for different devices. So if you want to distribute, a live event, for instance, over multiple mobile devices, so iPads, iPhones, Windows phones, etc. This is the thing to do it with. Service Bus is about communication between applications. Visual Studio Online is about development tools online. Cache, there's the new Redis Cache, and it's really like it's a database in memory, which is phenomenally fast to use. But it's actually backed up by persistent storage as well. BizTalk, again, is about communication and queues between different services. Recovery services, you can create vaults. So you can actually do storage and backup from on-premises. You can do storage and backup from in the cloud, and you can do your, obviously, recovery. CDN is a content delivery network, and the idea here is if you've got a website and you've got content on that website which is static, or you've got downloadable content that you want people to be able to download, if you join the CDN network, that content that is static will be distributed worldwide. So that if you've got someone accessing your website from Asia, you might not want to, because you're sort of starting up, you may not want a website presence in Asia, but what you can have is you can have a CDN delivery network delivering the content. Automation is about the actually automating creation, deployment, monitoring, maintenance of Azure resources. Scheduler allows you to probe endpoints on a scheduled basis. So for testing, for instance, HTTPS points, for testing queues. You've got API management. So if you've got a whole raft of different APIs that are called from different services in your organization, there probably isn't a consistent way of doing it. And what this does is allows you to create a facade and an API catalog. So now people can come in through this one point and actually access all of the APIs from the catalog. Machine learning is really about, allows to do predictive analysis on data, and it's really about data scientists using this to do really deep, powerful mining of data and analysis of data. Networks, that's more to do with us, infrastructure stuff, we'll come back on that. Traffic management, you deploy a website in Europe, you deploy a website in Asia, and what traffic management will do is it will give you geo DNS. So you will actually, if someone connects to you from an Asia client, it will connect to the Asia website and the Asia data center. And if you're coming from Europe somewhere, you will connect to the thing. So it's doing that traffic management, the geolocated DNS. Remote apps is a way of publishing things like Office 2013 to lots of different devices and making them available. The management services here is all about sort of setting up alerts and alert logging. Active Directory we'll come back to. The marketplace, in case none of that suits your needs or it's not enough, you can go to the marketplace, and this is where you can buy additional services. So, rather than reinventing the wheel, maybe you should be looking in here for what you need. The other thing is, if you got something that you could make available to the world, then you could publish it into the marketplace as well. Let's just close that and go back. So Store Simple is about the integration of on-premise and cloud storage solutions. And settings here, I've got 3 subscriptions I actually use. Those are my subscriptions. I've got certificates for management. I've got my administrators of the portal, which I'm not going to show you because I don't want to give those names away. And then I've got up here the ability of actually going to the new portal, and rather than clicking on there, I've actually got the new portal loaded to save a few seconds. Notice it says preview. Some of the things you want to do cannot be done in here. What I could do is I could browse for things, so I can browse for websites, SQL databases, or I can go new. I can new everything, and I can choose the new functionality that I want to create, so virtual machine, a website, and so on. Okay, so what we're going to do here in this session is focus in on the compute, the storage. I've mentioned the databases, but we'll also talk about the networking as well. So in terms of compute, what we have is we got websites, right? And those websites support web jobs, all right? So you're thinking, I want to run the background task. What I'm going to need is a virtual machine. What you can do on a website is put a web job on, which is your continuous background task. So we can actually create those. We've got cloud services, and cloud services is really how the Azure platform started. and I will come back and just briefly mention those. And then you've got the virtual machines that you all know and love, where you deploy your servers, you deploy applications onto those servers, and so on. So in terms of storage, we've got blobs, tables, queues, and just in preview, there's files as well. Okay. And databases, we've got SQL database, we've got MySQL database when creating websites. But you can fire up a virtual machine and have an Oracle database or whatever type of database that you want on it. And then we've got many options for via VMs for doing anything, basically. So, the animation's gone a bit strange. Never mind. So our website consists of a website instance, all right? And then depending on how much money you spend, depends what more you get. So you've got a number of service tiers. You've got free, you've got shared, basic, and standard, okay? And it's got automatic load balancing, and provided you've got the correct tier, you can actually automatically add additional instances. So now think about it as one web server. We've automatically scaled to multiple web servers, all right? So you can meet your peak demand, and then you scale it back down again, right? And you can even scale between tiers as well. And so in terms of what can we run on our websites, we can actually run .NET, Java, PHP, Python, Node.js, and then you could actually go and get additional things from the gallery to give you additional capability on top of that. How do we create one? Well, we can select a template from the gallery, or we can just say, create a blank site. Create a blank site, I deploy what I want into it. So I could have a blank website, and then I could deploy, and I can automate the deployment. I could put use Java or whatever, PHP, whatever I want to do. You've also got the ability to deploy using all the standard web tools. So you can go from the GitHub and so on. If you want, you can auto-scale. And you can auto-scale based on different parameters. And then, of course, we can connect back to a SQL database that we create in the cloud as well. But if you want to, you could connect to resources on premises. So in the cloud, we could have this web front end, which is highly scalable, on demand, pay as you go, accessing resources in our corporate network, which are already there and already exist. We've just now made them available through a highly scalable portal. Your starter domain is yoursite.azurewebsites.net. All right? If you go for free, you can't put a domain name in. All right? If you go for shared, it's like free, but you can put domain names. All right? And the idea of shared is really for developers. All right? And then we've got basic and standard. But I'm going to come back on those in a second, because what I'm going to do is actually go through a demo of this and bring out some various points as we go. So I'm going to do this, I'm going to actually use the new portal. And if I go and just click on new here, and I choose web, what it does is it creates me an empty website. Okay, I don't want to do that. I want to go new, everything. I choose web, and then I can choose from the gallery what type of website I want to create. So a website with a SQL database, a website with a MySQL database, WordPress, .NET, Joomla, you name it, Drupal, it's there. Let's start with an ASP.NET starter website, okay? So we'll go for one of them. So we say create on that, and the next thing is it says, what web hosting plan do you want to do? Well, it's also giving me the URL. So let's put the URL in, and we'll call it XTS NIC. All right, and it's giving me a little green tick on there, so it says that's okay as a name, so no one else has created one of those. Web hosting plan. I can create my own web hosting plan. So we'll call it the NIC plan. All right, and I can go OK on that. And then the next thing it's going to do is it's actually showing me on this one what I'm using in terms of it's chosen the standard plan. Let's do this. Let's go browse all pricing tiers. So we've got a standard plan, which is a single core, 1.75. This is our own instance that's running. This is our own virtual machine. All right. We can have a 2-core virtual machine, a 4-core virtual machine, and obviously we get different amounts of storage available to us, different capability for, in terms of SSL, we can have our own SSL certs on there for 1 IP and 5 with the name identifier, the server name identifier. Up to 10 instances for scaling. Backup is daily. 5 slots for deployment, so we can have 5 slots where we deploy into and then turn those into production. And we're allowed geo traffic management. Okay, if we go, I'm not going to go through the details, all of them. I just really wanted to point out that in here, what we can see is what's going here. We've got the basic is the we don't have our scaling capability we had in standard. We can only go to 3 instances, and then if we go to the free, we don't even get custom domains, but we can go to shared and get custom domains. So what I'm doing is I'm actually going to go and we'll stick to the standard, which is selected for us automatically. Okay, that. So I now have a NIC plan, which is the standard plan. I then have the ability of creating what's called a resource group, and these are new. These have only come out in the last few months. So I'm going to create a new resource group, and this is like I'm going to call it NIC1 app. All right, so this is like I create a resource group to contain all the things associated with this application. So it could be a website, I could put a SQL database in there, I could have a virtual network in there, and everything gets created under this resource group. And it's a life cycle boundary. So if I delete the resource group, I delete everything within it. All right? So that's really what that resource groups are for. So we'll create that one. And then I choose the subscription I'm going to use. So I'm using my Visual Studio Ultimate subscription. I choose a location for this thing, and I go create. And it sort of starts off, and it says it's creating it over here. So while it's doing that, let's go to the browser and look at one I did earlier. And what I want to do is browse for websites. And I have this thing, XTS ACS. So let's choose that. And it's free, all right? So it's not going to cost me anything, all right? So I can't use the domain name on it. And if I look down here, and I look down for scaling, it says I can't do it, all right? I need a better plan, right? But I can scale the plan up, all right? And I can scale the plan all the way back down to free. If I wanted to connect this guy to a virtual network to talk to other resources, all right, I can't do it. All right, upgrade, I can only do that from standard, so I can't do that in basic even. I have to do it in standard. So let's go back here. Let's close those guys off and go back to this website, which is XTS2, which is in the standard pricing tier. And what I'm going to do here is go across under scaling, click on there, and then it gives me the scaling, what I want to do in terms of instances. So I can go up, because it's standard, I can go up to 10 instances I can run. Now I could manually scale this, or I can switch it over to basically scale on performance. So I can go from 1 instance, or I could have a quiescent, I could change that to 2 instances, and I can go all the way up. Now I can go to 6 instances, so I can decide. So my minimum could be 2 instances, my maximum could be 6 instances. Why wouldn't I go to 10? Because maybe I don't want to pay the money, all right? and I think I'll never use it. And what it's going to do is it's going to scale up when CPU usage is between 60 and 80%. So when it falls below 60, it will scale down. When it goes above 80, it will scale up. And if I don't like that as a metric, what I can do is go add a metric, and I can base a metric on disk queue length, HTTP queue length, data in, data out, and I can then say greater than, less than, set my threshold. I've got scale up rules, and I've got scale down rules. So lots of scaling capability there. And as I say, we can change the pricing tier as we want to. So I can go up and I can go down. So what we can do is we can have a very quick way, create a website. Right? It could be using a database here, or it could be accessing data from on-premises. But what we've done is a very highly available website, highly scalable. If you want it, deploy it in Western Europe, deploy it in Asia, and put Geo DNS on top of it. And now we've got a worldwide presence for our data, or access through our portal. So I'm going to mention these because they do come up. They're not used very much anymore, but they do have their purpose. This is the cloud services, the web and worker roles. The concept here, this is the initial concept for Azure, is you would have a web role which has an instance, and it would automatically scale up or manually scale up and scale down. And what a web role does, it's running an instance, so it's running in its own virtual machine, all right? So we can actually connect to that virtual machine if we want to. The virtual machine spins up to run that instance, right? So if we want to, we can do a startup script on that virtual machine to make some changes when it spins up. You don't have that capability, even if you're running your own instance of a website. Right? Basically what you're doing is you're running the website on an instance that's totally looked after by Microsoft. So here you've got the web role. You've also got this capability of what's called a worker role, and the worker role is basically compute. So we've got web front end, we've got a worker role, it's compute, and the web role could show accessing a database there. There's nothing to stop you having the web role access a database. We need to communicate between the two, and we do that with queues and tables. So what I can do is my web role can drop something into a queue, and then the worker role picks it out of the queue and works on it. All right? And so all the web instances are all sitting in one, working on one queue. They all drop it into the queue, and the back end's all pulling out of the queue. So the more back end, the quicker you empty the queue, and the more front ends, the quicker you put things in the queue. Right? The great thing about websites, which are done through automatically scaling or manually scaling if you want to, and this lot, it's like a perfect clone. If you've ever deployed a website in a farm, right? You deploy the first website, and great, everything works beautifully, and then you deploy the next one, and maybe somebody makes a slight configuration change on it, and you deploy the next one, and somebody tweaks that one slightly, and they sort of, through Chinese whispers, the web farm, all the different instances of servers don't necessarily look the same. With this, it's perfect. It's one instance, it's one configuration, and it just automatically gets cloned, right? As you roll the instances up, and as you roll the instances down, they just get killed off, and it's all automatically load balanced. In terms of Microsoft Azure VMs, in fact, let me just show you very quickly before we look at the VMs. Let's look at these roles. So I'm going to have to go back to the portal to look at the cloud services on here. So if we look at cloud services, I've got a cloud service running. I'm not going to go into all the details because we don't have time for it. Oh, production, nothing in production, but if we look in staging, I've got something sitting in staging, all right? And I look down here, it's sitting in staging, but it gets a really big GUID as part of its URL. So this is where we can test something in staging. When we're ready for it, we say swap. And what will happen is this will change over from being a staging URL onto this configuration. It will have the production URL. And then whatever was in production, if there was something in production, then switches over to staging. And then you can upgrade that, change that, and then flip it back again. So there's, and all of that's without loss of service. So you automatically switch over. If I look at my instances, what I have over here is I've got 2 web roles and 2 worker roles running. And if I go back to my dashboard and we actually click on this thing down here, it will take me across to my application. And it's I will use the blobs, tables, and queues in a moment. But just watch this. At the moment, the role name is web role 1. Its instance is 0. Fault domain 0. Update domain 0. Let's try flipping this a few times and see if we switch over, which we may or we may not. Go on. Play. No, it's not going to do it. It was just a possibility of coming in on the other instance at the front end. And what I wanted to really show you is notice the fault domain and the update domain. What will happen is you've got the Azure cloud, right? You've got a rack. If the rack goes out because the power goes, right, you've lost everything in that rack, right? When it comes to servicing and they update the operating system, right, then they'll update it in an update domain. What you want to do is make sure that your instances are across different update and different fault domains. So if you have a single instance, Microsoft cannot meet the SLA, right, because they do need to update things. They could have a single failure. But if you distribute it across an update domain and across fault domains, then what will happen is if one goes out, the other will keep running. So if that rack goes down, this rack hopefully won't go out at the same time. If they come to service it, do an update, they'll do it here. They'll make sure it's finished here before they move over here and start the update on this one. And I'll just try it. Oh, there it goes. You see it? It's just now showing fault domain 1, update domain 1. So I've actually switched over to the other instance at the front end. And you also see it now showed the, so that's actually shown the switch over. Okay, let's go back to VMs. So what VMs do is they're virtual machines. They're running effectively now on Server 2012 R2. So everything that you understand about Server 22 R2 virtual machines pretty much applies here, all right? But where do we store the VHDs? We put them in Blob Storage. And we can have the operating system disks. We can have our data disks sitting in Blob Storage. How do we get them there? We upload them from on-premises, all right? If the data storage is enormous, we can actually ship it. So you've got the option of actually shipping it to the data center, and then having shipped the hard drive to the data center, Microsoft will load it for you, all right? And you can now do it. That's a fairly new feature. We then have a virtual machine attached to that data and that OS storage. You can also create from gallery as well. And so here I've got, in my blob storage, I've got one operating system data attached to one VM, and then I've just got an operating system disk attached to the other VM. If you want, you create a disk, and you can then, or you create a virtual machine, you can then sysprep it and put it into your gallery, so that when you need to create another copy of this, it's very simple, it's already in the gallery. So let's have a look at virtual machines, and I think this is, oh, okay, so that slide's got in the wrong place. All right. Let's carry on with this then for the moment. So virtual machines actually run in what we call a cloud service. And a cloud service has a public VIP on the front end of it. So you have a public IP address. And when you deploy, you will deploy into that virtual machine, into that cloud service. You can then access it through this public VIP. You can also put a virtual network together and connect this virtual machine to the virtual network, right? In which case, you could turn off access from the public IP address. So if I was deploying half a dozen virtual machines, right, I could turn off access from the public address as long as I've got access either through a VPN gateway onto the virtual network, or I've got access through a VIP to a jump server. I could come in and then RDP over my virtual network to all of my different machines. So we can actually do that and manage it that way. So you have this deployed into a cloud service. You have an endpoint, which is our VIP, and then we can do port management, because we're going to come in and we're going to come in to, on each virtual machine, we want to go to the RDP port, but we're coming in, if we've got multiple machines in a single cloud service, we've only got one IP address. So what we have to do is port mapping. So when we do an RDP connect, we'll go to one port number to go RDP to that server, another port number to go to RDP to that server, and another port number to RDP to that server. So as an example there, what we've got is the default site here is on port 80 we've published. So this is a VM running a web server. So on port 80, we've got HTTPS on 443, and the remote desktop is actually coming in externally to the VIP on 63.582, but of course the private port is the RDP port on the server itself, which is the 3389 port. So we can do that mapping automatically. So which execution model do you use? And right at the beginning, what you'd do is you would use cloud services, right? But really, your front end is now seen as a website. So you do a website front end. You could, if you wanted to, connect that web front end to a worker role if you wanted to go through a cloud service, but probably you'll connect it to a virtual machine. So really, in some ways, the cloud service is to a certain extent being depreciated, because to actually generate a cloud service app, it's a special piece of coding, right? Whereas, of course, with a virtual machine, you can just take an app that already works and deploy it onto that virtual machine. Whereas if it's using cloud service, it's a special worker role app. It's a special web role app as well. So if I was you, I would be looking at using websites as the front end. If you need to run a continuous process, remember you've got web jobs, which will allow you to do that. And then for your back end, you'll probably use a virtual machine of some kind, running whatever you want. So I'm just going to go very, very quickly through the creation of a virtual machine. And the reason I want to do it is just to bring some concepts up as we go. And what we'll do is we'll actually, oops, what's happened to this? There, it's on there. We'll use the old portal. And I'm going to come to the virtual machines here. I'm going to create a virtual machine. I'm going to do it from gallery. And here's a virtual machine. So do I want a 2012 data center virtual machine? Do I want a SQL server? Do I want a BizTalk server? Do I want an Oracle database running on the server, etc.? Okay. So let's just choose a Windows Server technical preview machine. And we can choose one of those, and we go on. Let's just make this slightly smaller, if it will work. Can I scale it? Yes. So we go on from there. Still scaling itself, and we give it a name. So I'm going to call it NIC 1. Does that work? Yep. Okay. Which tier do I want? Well, if I get standard tier, I can go all the way from a shared core all the way up to a G5, which is 32 core with 448 gigabytes of memory, which should do most people. Yeah, it'll certainly do your credit card in as well. So be careful on that one. A basic is very much more basic. Okay, so shared all the way up to an 8 core with 14 gigs of memory. Let's just choose that one. I need a username, and of course we all choose something like admin, which it won't accept. So you think, oh, I know Unix word, I could use root. It won't accept. So any of the sort of common thing. So I just use manager in here. So manager, we need a password. And we need to confirm that password. On we go from there. The cloud service. So this is the cloud service which is going to give us a virtual or VIP, virtual IP, which is a public address on it, right? So if I already had an existing cloud service, I could deploy into it, or I can create a new cloud service. So we'll create a new cloud service, and it wants to be, because it's publicly available, it needs to resolve correctly. So let's try NIC 101, and it's happy with that. The subscription I'm going to use, where I'm going to deploy this thing, the storage account I'm going to use for my virtual machines, and this thing is the availability set. At the moment, it's none. What I can do is create one. And let's say I was going to put my DCs. And what an availability set is, basically you're telling the Azure cloud that these machines in this availability set must be available, which means they will be put over different update domains, over different default domains. If you didn't have them in the same availability set, they could all end up on the same rack. All right. Now, in terms of, I can say where I'm going to deploy it, or I can deploy it actually onto a virtual network. So we've got regions to deploy, or I could actually, if I wanted to, put it onto a virtual network. But we won't do that. Well, in fact, I'll need to switch over to my other trial, which is my ultimate trial, and then I could put it on the XTS Net 100. So now this is going onto a virtual network. So not only can we connect to this guy with a public IP address through the cloud VIP, we can now get to him on a public, on a network. And that's it. That will then go on and create your virtual machine, which I'm not going to do because we don't have time for it. So in terms of storage, we have the actual storage accounts provide us with blobs, tables, queues, and new, and it's currently in preview, is files. So blobs is where we put our big data blobs, all right, such as, all right, the capability of our VHDs, our virtual machines, go in there, the virtual hard disks. The tables are for communication between web roles and worker roles. It's a sort of semi-structured table. And queues is where you can put something in, and it will flow along the queue, and somebody else can take it out. So you've got that capability if you want it. Azure Premium is now available, and that is all SSD storage. So unbelievably fast number of IOPS. So blobs, tables, queues, and files under preview, because people kept saying, yeah, it's all very well, but we do want to get at this stuff with SMB, because all of this blobs, tables, and queues, it's all about REST API calls to gain access. The data storage itself, within a data center, you get 3 copies of your data, and it's automatically replicated. If you want to, you can go geo-replication between data centers. So automatically you get what's referred to as LRS, or local redundancy storage. You can have zone redundancy storage, where we got 3 replicators distributed across data centers. All right, but those data centers could be quite close to each other. All right, so if something absolute disaster happened in that area of the world, we could lose all our data. So if you want to, you can actually choose geo-replication, in which case you will actually do geographic redundant storage GRS, and it's guaranteed there's at least 200 miles separation. So if you had a really big disaster, you could still knock them both out, but it's sort of 200 miles plus of separation. And then you've got read access geographic redundancy, which is again a new feature which allows you to, normally it's just replicated, you can't read it, but this gives you the ability of having read access to the geo-redundant data. Obviously, it's all about pricing. In terms of storage access, it's all done with REST API calls, and you can access it from anywhere. And if you make it public, you don't even need an access key. So I could publish in a container and say it's a public container, and anyone can gain access to it through a REST API. And so we can get to it from anywhere, and there's lots of tools like storage at Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, Cloudberry, Cloud Explorer, lots of tools you can download for gaining access. So what I want to do is just very briefly show you storage in action. And what I've got is, if I go, let's cancel this out. If I go down here to my storage, we can see I have storage. If I go to the dashboard, I've got my storage endpoints. I don't actually have the file preview enabled on this one. And so I can get to my blob. I've got URL for that, URL for the table, URL for the queue. If I go across to my application here, right, and I go to blobs, I can upload a blob. Okay, so let's just upload blob 1. And that has gone up into cloud storage, but notice it's got a URL associated with it. So I can, because it's public, it happens to be public storage here, I can just pop that in there, enter it, and there's the blob, which I've just downloaded with a standard HTTP GET, because it's using REST API calls. We've got storage keys to protect the storage, and obviously with a storage key, then if I've said it needs the key, then I would have had to supply the key. If I go back to my little application here, tables are, I'm just going to put a couple of things in this table, WS, RT, etc. So they go into the table. Then I've got a queue. And remember, the queue is about putting things in a queue. So I put 20 things in the queue. And then those have been put in by the web front end, and the worker roles are pulling it out of the queue. Let's just use the storage, Azure Storage Explorer, which is a freebie which can be downloaded. And under images, there's my blob storage. So I'm now accessing up into the cloud. There's my blob storage. There's my table, and the message WWS RT for the table, and there is my queue, and I put 20 things in the queue, but it's down to 13 already because my worker roles at the back end are pulling them out of the queue. All right? But the key, what I really want to do, just the message is that we'll need blob storage for our VMs, and you can gain access to your blob storage from anywhere. So if you use something like this or use something like Cloud Explorer, you can just drag and drop VMs straight up into storage. This is set up, by the way, when I configure the account on here. If I do an add account, I need to specify the name of the account, plus I need to specify the account key that is used to access the account. So this is actually a secure way of accessing it. So in terms of virtual network, you create a network just as you would for on-prem. So you create an address space, you create subnets within it, you can create a gateway subnet, and you can have a gateway, which is a VPN gateway to on-premises. So you can now go through that gateway directly to the on-premise, any on-premise resources. We can create hybrid solutions. And with a hybrid solution, you can only do it if you want to bring it from a website onto the virtual network, you can only do it if you're running standard tier, right? And you don't actually connect a website directly down to a VPN, down to a virtual network. What you do is you use a point-to-site VPN. So each of those web servers are actually a point which is then connecting to a VPN gateway. Right, and that's how they're coming in. And if you wanted to, if you didn't want to go full VPN gateway, you could go point to site, so from Azure down to on-premises. So there's lots of options for setting up and networking. A cloud service, I can put the cloud service on the virtual network. And I've got my VMs on the virtual network. I could have my SQL database up in the cloud on the virtual network. And then obviously, if I put a gateway through via the VPN to my on-premises, I can access all the on-premise stuff as well. So if we want to manage identity, then you've now got the new Windows Azure Active Directory. And if you think about how does it relate to on-premise Active Directory? On-premise Active Directory is the one we know and love and have used for years, where we look after absolutely everything. We deploy our DCs, our hardware, we create and manage our users, and we add additional directory services as needed. So lightweight directory services, Active Directory, federation services, all of those things that we can add in, and also the certificate services. Today, the Azure Active Directory is about authentication. Microsoft manage it, high availability in terms of the infrastructure across multiple data centers. And what you're responsible for is the data you put in there, the users you put in there. And then what it will do is it will manage authentication, but it's all about federated protocols. So it's all about WS Federation. It's all about SAML. It's all about OAuth 2. OpenID Connect is now supported. There is the access control service as well. And there's multi-factor authentication capability built in. And what you'll see, like on premises, you've got lots of Active Directory services. You'll probably see more Active Directory services appearing in the cloud as well. If you want to use the Azure Active Directory, you become a tenant, and you have a tenancy up in the Azure cloud. You have a management portal. You have a REST APIs for accessing it and gaining access, creating users, etc. You have Graph API for pulling out hierarchical structures out of the directory. And then you can authenticate to that directory. And where can you go to? Well, you can go to Azure subscription, you can go to Office 365, your apps, you can go to an application gallery, partner applications, and you can sync users from your own AD into the directory as well. Right? So what I like to think about this as is I like to think now is I've got my on-premise AD. When it comes to federation and reaching out beyond the boundaries of my AD, all right, or my corporate network, I'm now thinking maybe I should be using the Azure AD to do that. And you can do all sorts of, you can run your own on-premise ADFS integrated in with the Azure AD. And just to very quickly finish off, I just want to very quickly show you one last demo. And we need the portal for this. So I've got, if I go, let's go, we need this portal here. If I go up to my websites, remember I've got this website, XTS2, all right? And XTS2, if we look at it, what we see is XTS2 is a very, very simple website, okay? Let's have a look what we can do to that. Now, with XTS2, we can select it, we can go configure, and once it's configured, we can go down here and we can go down to authentication and authorization, configure it. Come on. There you go. And what it's doing is I'm going to create a new application, and I'm using my Azure Active Directory X3 seminars. Click on that, and it's configuring authentication and authorization on here. And what we'll do now, that was successful, we'll just bring up a in private browsing, so I'm not going to get upset by any cookies. I'm going to go to HTTPS XTS2, and what we should find is we get redirected to the Azure AD. I log in as one of my users from that tenancy. What are we? Where have I got? So, .co.uk on there. Okay, so what it's done is it's recognized that I'm a tenant in the Azure AD. It's come through to my own personal branding. And now if I click sign in, we should end up at the website, which is now secured through federated identity. All right, and it was as simple as literally sort of 3 clicks to now put front-end authentication on this website. Right. And that's the sort of thing you can do. That's the sort of agility and speed that we can start moving with. And that was my main message was that we want to make sure that you become the expert in your organization that brought scalability and agility to your IT department. And to do that, we let the cloud take the strain. I hope you enjoyed the session. It was a bit of a whistle stop, but if you've got any questions, by all means, come down and ask away. Otherwise, don't forget to pose a question at the Ask the Experts. There's going to be lots of experts there. I'm not quite sure how many people, but I should be there as well if you want to ask questions. Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you.